Hello and welcome to today's Retainers for Life webinar. The title of this webinar today is The Future of Retention, Customized Models, Data-Driven Decisions, and the Orthodontic Shift. My name is Chris Bentson, and I have the pleasure today of asking the questions instead of answering them, so I'm in a great spot. But I do have a lot of interest in this topic because I think this idea of possibly monetizing retention is great for practice owners, and I think the consumer's ready for it as well. So I think it's one of those win-win ideas, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. So I have two guests today. Amy Jackson, orthodontist and founder of Retainers for Life. She's a practicing orthodontist in San Antonio, a good friend, and also a fellow Baylor grad. Go Bears.
Like Bears.
We also have Ryan Moynihan, who everyone knows. He's the CEO of Gauge. He's a data analytics guru. I've stolen more information from Ryan than he's probably given, but I'm not out there as much anymore, so I don't get to do that as much. But he's a great friend and colleague, and it's great to have really two of my favorite people in the profession on this. And we just really want to talk about this whole idea of retainers for life, what it could or couldn't mean for your practice, why it's an important idea, I think, for you all to consider. So we'll get started really on the current state of retention. And this question is kind of for both of you, but it seems to me that, you know, wearing your retainers is kind of the cornerstone of long-term healthy orthodontic case success. And I, for one, was a patient that after I was 12 or 13, didn't wear my retainer for very long and had a second treatment as an adult as a result. Yet, providing the process of, I don't have my retainer, and I think I should be wearing it is pretty much the same today as it's been for the last 50 years. And we do that kind of as a one-off in our practice. It can be very disruptive. I'm not sure if it makes money or doesn't make money. I have the sense that it doesn't. But why are we still doing it the same way? We'll start with you, Amy. Are orthodontists making money the way they're doing it now?
So my belief is that we're doing it the same way we've always been doing it just because of inertia, right? I truly believe there are a lot of things inside the practice that we've been doing the same way for decades, just because that's what our predecessors did and that's what we've always done. The cool thing is with retention, because of the advent of 3D printing and intraoral scanners, we have the ability to provide a different type of service for retainers and retention. Change is very hard. And I will be the first to tell you that change is even hard for me. I recently took a personality test. And one of the results came back and said, whatever you do, don't move this person's stapler. And that does speak to my personality, right? I am a creature of habit, and I think most of us are, right? That's just the path of least resistance to continue to do things the way that they've been done. But you and I both know that we really need to embrace change to drive progress and success in our practices. And so when we reach an opportunity to do things a little different or a little better, we have two options. And one is to step outside of our comfort zone and into a mode of growth, or retreat back into safety. And so the hope is that as we look at these new retention options that are available to practices and to patients, we really take time to evaluate if it's a good thing for our practice, if it's a good thing for our business, is it a good thing for our staff, and is it also a good thing for the patient? And in my opinion, if you can check each one of those boxes, it makes sense to look at doing things a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think so too. Ryan, as CEO of Gauge, everybody has a practice management system that actually has the numbers that Gauge expresses, but it's impossible to, get them easily and quickly and have kind of a dashboard or a snapshot. You've dealt with, I would, easily say for me, I think Gauge is one of the best practice management tools you can use. But why do you think the hesitancy is out there for practitioners to just keep doing the same thing they've always been doing?
Yeah, so I'll take a different approach as I'm not an orthodontist, but I look at it from a business perspective. And, as I've started to work with the Retainers for Life team, it's been actually even an aha moment for me on the business side of what this model can look like. So as we get deeper into this podcast, I know we're going to kind of unlock what that looks like. But I think, truly understanding not only the revenue that you can generate, but also the profitability that you can generate by having a retainer program, I think is the piece that, especially in this day and age where we're starting to see, overall practice growth in aggregate be right around 1%. We've come out of a couple of years where we were down. This can actually help boost that top line, a point or two actually, and get back to maybe that more traditional 3 to 5% growth. But as we've started to unpack the model and worked really closely with Lorraine on the Retainers for Life team and really put together a detailed model, it's really unlocked from my point of view, like there is a pretty solid business model here. And there's a reason to look at that where maybe in the past, a traditional orthodontist maybe is not looking at the full profit and loss piece of this from a retainer perspective, but it's definitely pretty lucrative when you look at the different ways that it can help your practice.
Yeah, I think so. And I think to your 2 points, I would also, I've been talking about, birth trends for a long time, and they're just so small and incremental, but we certainly know that we have fewer kids 10 years from now. They're going to be coming into the market than not. I think we have to look as orthodontic practitioners on ways to grow. And certainly this is one of those. So great stuff. We're talking about growth. We're talking about profitability around retainers, but I'm not sure that everybody really knows what Retainers for Life does. And Amy, you built this company, launched it as a practicing orthodontist, just around this concept of a fully customizable retention model that was, as you say, good for the orthodontist, good for the staff, and good for the patients. I think it does check those 3 boxes. But can you, for the people who don't know what Retainers for Life is, give us a real brief description of what is the model and how does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great place to start. The easiest way to describe it is as an insurance policy for retainers. So we explain it to the patients as a membership. So they purchase a one-time membership, and what that membership unlocks for them is wholesale pricing of retainers whenever they need or want to replace the retainers. It's also important to us. We built the retainer delivery to be very similar to an Amazon experience. So when a patient needs or wants a retainer, they go online, they order it, they can do that on their phone, they can do that on the computer. The retainer is shipped out same day, and depending on the shipping method, will determine how many days until it's actually in their hands or in their mailbox. But that's really it in a nutshell. They pay one time to unlock wholesale pricing of retainers whenever they need them, wherever they need them, for a lifetime. Now, our model has morphed a lot through the years, and that's just, as a company, as a startup, it's very important that we are nimble and that we listen, and we are satisfying the needs of our doctors as they change. And so we started off with just a membership platform, but we now have the ability to unlock retainers as you go. So if a practice just doesn't want to make any more replacement retainers or any end of treatment retainers, we have the ability to take on all of that for them. So we really are a retainer solution company for whatever the pain points are inside of your practice. Now, I'm a fan of the membership program because, again, I believe it's a win for my team because they no longer have to make the replacement retainers and they get bonused. It's a win for me from a profitability standpoint. Plus, it's freeing up chair time. But also, as you'll see through the model that we work through with Gage, that it also saves the patients money over time, being able to order wholesale pricing retainers.
Yeah, good stuff. And I think I've been cruised your website and listened to every video on there. And I would say to the listeners, if there's a lot of nuance and questions and FAQs that they've got answers to on the website. So if you want to go there and just kind of check it out more, I think it will answer a lot of your question. But you mentioned, Amy, that your personality is resistant to change. I don't think that's too uncommon with your colleagues. But as you have evolved and morphed over the years, what would you say is the number one resistance point that you get from doctors when they hear about the model that says, kind of maybe that's good for somebody else, but not me? Where is the hurdle?
So another great question. I would say number one that comes in my mind is just resistance to change, and it's not it. So part of it is the doctor. Again, I'll use myself as that personality that is resistant to change. But it's also shaking things up with your team, right? Change is always very difficult for the team, causes a lot of anxiety. And as we know that if you don't have your team on board with whatever it is that you're wanting to do inside your practice, it will fail. It will sink from day one. So not only do you have to get behind this change and believe in it, but the staff has to feel the same. And I think the other thing that I would hear a lot, especially in the beginning, and I really didn't have a great answer for, was, well, why wouldn't I just do it myself? I can make more money if I do it myself inside the practice. And I don't want to tell any doctor what to do inside their practice or with their business. You really have to weigh all the pros and cons and figure out what your pain point is and what you're trying to solve for. But the cool thing is we've now been doing this long enough that we have numbers to show that outsourcing, you can actually make more money with a retainer platform outsourcing it than you can running that business inside your business, which is good news, right? It not only reduces the workload on your team and your staff. You don't have to manage the calls and the upset patients. All of that is managed for you, but you're actually making more money outsourcing it than you are doing it inside your practice, which is pretty unique. So I think that to me, and I was of the same mindset. Why would I hand this over to somebody else when I can make more money doing it myself? But now, having been the journey, the truth is I can make more money outsourcing it, which is unique. The other thing that I really didn't sit well with me when I was running this inside my practice is I had a high adoption rate of people paying for membership. But then what would happen is because they had to bring their models back into the office to get the replacement retainers, they just didn't. They got busy. Life happens, and it was more of a burden for them to bring their models in to get the replacement retainers than just move on with their life and forget about retainers altogether. And so for me, I didn't like that because I felt like the patients were investing in this membership, but then they were wasting their money on the membership because they weren't utilizing it. So those were two things that I saw firsthand, and hopefully we're solving for.
Yeah, I think what resonates for me is, I think years ago when the aligners came out, and, everybody went out and bought a digital printer and said, I'm not going to buy them and pay the lab fee. I'll just do it myself. And you can kind of do that when you're young and when you're not as busy. But as you reach a certain scale, it doesn't make sense. So, Ryan, you are kind of looking at profitability all the time. You've got more data than anybody else in orthodontics. I don't know if we're probably too new into this to really have data on what is a retention program like this mean. But, just as much as you're out there, can you speak any about the behaviors of how doctors are managing post-treatment care with retainers versus maybe even a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I mean, we can't necessarily see the shift when it comes to retention. I mean, one of the metrics that we do track and gauge is number of percent of appointments that are actually retention appointments, and that has remained relatively flat over the past couple of years. But one of the things that, as you start to unpack an appointment, there is a value to the appointment. There is a cost to the appointment, right? And some of the other profitability lectures that I do is around, we look at the term value per visit, which is what do you charge for treatment divided by number of visits it takes to complete treatment. And we know that the fewer visits that you can have a patient in the practice, the more profitability that you can drive to your practice, meaning that there is a cost to an appointment, right? And on average, we see that to be around $192. So if you're selling a $250 retainer, that chair time for that appointment is around $192. So right now, the metric is around 4.2 to 4.6%. It kind of oscillates between those as far as a percent of appointments that are around retention. We want that to be less than 7%. So overall, the industry is doing really well there. However, you still have 4 to 4.5% of your appointments that are dedicated to retention, whereas through a traditional model, through like Retainers for Life, you wouldn't necessarily have that appointment. It would be shipped directly to the patient. That would alleviate that. So there's a cost to that. So in that scenario, and we'll get more into that, I think, a little bit later, as far as just kind of what the math looks like. Think about selling a $250 retainer and having a $192 cost to put them in your chair. And we haven't even taken out the other costs that it takes to actually build the retainer, sell the retainer, so on and so forth. So it's a very low margin, potentially even losing money when we start to unpack that total model from that perspective. So that's where, as I've started to look at like what information do we have available and gauge on retention, and then tying it back to some of the profitability stuff that we've done, we know there's a cost to an appointment, and we know that there's an opportunity there that potentially to outsource that can save you money in the long run. And we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'd just like to follow up on that and get into the economics of it a little bit more, because I think most orthodontists probably think, hey, I'm making money on making a retainer in my office if somebody comes in. But as you've just described, maybe you're making money or maybe you're losing money when you really look at the data and what it costs to put a chair in. So while we don't have a lot of aggregate data, I can tell you in my shop, when we're evaluating practices now, we're seeing big line items of revenue that we didn't used to see in some practices that have programs like Retainers for Life. And it can be in the significant dollar amounts, $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 of extra revenue per year. But as you think about this, longer term, and we're in this kind of low growth mode the last couple of years, at least 3 years that you described earlier on. What do you think doctor owners can expect versus the traditional, you lost a retainer, come in and make an appointment, and ultimately, I think I know the answer to this, you kind of just alluded to it. Is it more profitable than the way we've been doing things? But if you were, I guess, consulting or coaching a practice owner that was considering this, what kind of advice would you give them on what expectations they might be able to achieve changing models?
Yeah. So in partnering with Lorraine, Retainers for Life, she helped me tremendously, just kind of really understand the membership model versus kind of the inside traditional model of the practice. Now, I will say, this comes down to, as I mentioned earlier, this is about profitability. This is not necessarily just about revenue, because what we have seen in the model, depending upon what level of membership that a practice would take with a Retainers for Life program, that the revenue side of this equation will probably be somewhere between 20% and 55% less doing Retainers for Life revenue, not profit revenue, right? Than it would be traditionally, because you're selling that at the retail price of $250 versus the membership, right? But the cost side of Retainers for Life is really minimal. There's an onboarding piece, and then there's basically, we factored in how much is it going to cost an employee to pitch this within an office, which is very minimal. It's a 5-minute thing. Take that based on wages, and you can come up with an algorithm there. So when you look at profitability using a Retainers for Life membership program, that's much significantly higher than doing it inside your own lab. Like I said, revenue will be lower, but profit will be higher, because within your office, whether you do it in your own in-house lab or you outsource it to a lab, you're going to be spending time within your office to process the retainer, taking the scan, those types of things. You're going to have a seating appointment, which we just spoke about, does have some cost. If it's a lab, you're going to be shipping that from the lab, and then if you're doing it in-house, there's going to be time and materials to make the retainer in-house. So when you start breaking down those costs across, we put in some assumptions there too, that over the time of your retention, you'd have maybe 10 retainers over a 5-year period. You would definitely incur a whole lot more cost to offset that revenue that's potentially higher doing it yourself versus the membership side. So that's where I think the nuance is in this model, is that the membership side maybe has less revenue. However, there's not a lot of cost to activate it, whereas there's a lot of cost and time, energy, follow-up, all the different logistics that go into using a lab or doing it in-house in order to get that retainer to the patient, where the program itself takes care of all that and takes that off the doctor's lap.
Yeah, very interesting. And so, Amy, I would ask you, I think, kind of a two-part question. One is, when you tell doctors what Ryan just said, hey, your revenue might be lower, but your profit's going to be higher. There's some skepticism involved there, and I think it's really psychology. Ryan and I have looked at, what's the number one problem in practice ownership right now, and without question, it's staffing. Where do I get these people, and how do I keep them, and what do I have to pay them, and all the answers are difficult there. But I think there's a certain doctor psychology too that you have to address. And I think a patient psychology. I think if I lost my retainer, I would call my orthodontist once. But if I lost it again, or if I needed another one, I would probably stop that gig and not do that. So there's two pieces of psychology. One, how do you convince the doctors that what Ryan said is actually true and worth the effort, you're going to make more money and have less stress, and your staff's going to be happier, and your patients are going to be happier. And by the way, on the patient side, as I listen to the customer feedback videos on your website, I don't know who this staff person is that you have on support. They all said her name. I can't remember what it is, but she must be amazing. I was like going to myself, I'm going to hire this person. She must be fantastic. So I think the patient experience is great. But what is the psychology that you would talk to a doctor colleague about? Okay, you're thinking about this. You just heard this. Are you cool with making more money? Everybody say yes, but are you cool with less revenue, and that's going to turn into more money? How do you get over that hurdle?
Well, just as you mentioned, it's psychology, right? And it often takes the orthodontist, it takes a while for things to click, right? And we've seen that through the sales funnel and the sales process with Retainers for Life, that it often takes the doctor's own aha moment for them to realize, yes, I can actually unburden myself and my staff of all these replacement retainers, and I can actually make more profit when I do that. But it just takes a while. You've been through the orthodontic journey with aligners, right? Not to call out any companies, but this was the fear when aligners came to the market and we had these heavy lab fees, right? What are we going to do with these heavy lab fees? How is it going to affect our profitability? Are we going to be passing along that fee to the patient? So the aligner therapy is a lot more expensive than the braces. And you've been that journey with the industry. And so I think it's very similar. It takes a while for us to really, truly understand and unpack the numbers and see the magnitude of the efficiency that it can create for the practice. A little bit of efficiency doesn't go a long way and can't allow you to make true significant changes within your practice. But if you have a large magnitude of efficiency that you're bringing to the practice, meaning you're not dabbling in aligners, you're not dabbling in monitoring, but you really go full bore in adopting these let's call them new technologies, you do see with time, not only it is more profitable, but it frees up chair time, it frees up practice time. And it allows you to run a really lean team if that is one of your goals, which obviously helps with profitability. So it just takes time. It takes time for a doctor to see it, to realize it, and then having someone that comes with hard data like Gage and Ryan into the mix is really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on something that I've been talking about for 10 years, which is, when you look at the data in a fully digital model, if you can affect the efficiencies that digital brings to your practice, you can make more money even though you're spending more money on lab fees, for instance, or whatever the case may be. And the same perhaps true here with Retainers for Life on the membership fees. So, my question to you back, Amy, is you use the word dabble, and I think a lot of people do that when they're looking at a new idea, a new product, something to ship. What resources does Retainer for Life bring to bear when you're onboarding? And from just what you've seen over the last several years of running this thing, can you go all in from the beginning? And, how do you guys coach people to do that? And what kind of resources do you have for help? Because I think that's where you're going to really realize the efficiencies if you get everybody on board versus, well, we'll try it and whoever wants it can have it and whoever doesn't want it, we'll do it the old fashioned way. And then you really haven't changed anything and created a lot of chaos.
Yes. Well, that really is the cornerstone to the differentiator between the practices that come on and are very, very successful and those that the program falls flat in. And it really starts with the doctor. So what we found is our ideal doctor practice avatar is a doctor that stands in front of his team and says, we are going to do this. I need everybody to get on board, to listen and cooperate. And then we come in with our team. And if we have the support of the doctor and the team's on board, then it really is seamless. So we come in and we train for a full day. Second day is hand holding, where we help make sure and ensure that they understand the protocols and the processes They understand the benefits for the patient. I think that is also key. If there is resistance, it's usually because the team feels like, oh, this is one more thing. It is a new thing. I don't know. We just don't want to do this. But if they truly see the value in what you're providing for the patients, then it's easier to implement inside the practice. But yes, it starts with a mindset. And then it starts with our team training, hand-holding. And the other thing that's really important to us is when we come into the practice is what is front and center for Retainers for Life. It is the doctor and their own personal branding. It's not Retainers for Life. We are a support group to your practice. And so we come in and we brand everything with our own marketing group under your name and your brand. So everything that the patients see is doctor and brand facing, not necessarily Retainers for Life facing. And so I think that's important as well.
Yeah, I think we saw that in the DSO world. I mean, we used to, you signed up for one and we changed everything, and everyone was wearing, T-shirts with the new owner's name, and we found that that didn't work so well. So we're changing that model. Great stuff. And I would say, doctors, if you're listening to this, it starts with you. You got to believe in it. You got to lead a little bit. It's scary, but you got to take your team through it and say, this is the way we're going to do it, and it'll work great for you. I think you'll achieve great results. So maybe you touched on something at the beginning around customizable approach. You've kind of got two ways to do this now. And I'll follow up with you, Ryan, on, just this whole subscription idea and the economics around that. But for you, Amy, you started with one model, a fully customizable kind of, I'll call it a insurance plan / subscription model, but now you can tailor to a practice needs and do kind of a pay-as-you-go, and you can do either or. Can you explain this a little bit more? And what are the options that I, as a practice owner, might have? And why is this level of flexibility, do you feel, important?
So we get that question a lot. So I'm going to start by describing the two basic types of models that we have. So the first model that we have is what I described, which is what I have had a lot of success with inside my practice, and that is the membership. And how that works is a patient comes in for treatment. They can opt in at the beginning or end of treatment, and they pay a one-time membership fee. And that one-time membership fee locks them in for life to have the ability to order replacement retainers from the comfort of their home delivered to them at wholesale pricing. I have seen that create raving fans within my practice and also free up a lot of chair time. So that is my favorite way to offer Retainers for Life to patients. But as you know, all practices and doctors are very, very different. Their pain points are different. They practice under they use different auxiliaries, they practice differently. And so it's important that we have also options for those doctors that don't want to offer memberships to their patients. So we also offer what we call a pay-as-you-go model. And that is a very traditional model where you're offloading the work, the making of the replacement retainers, the opening of chair time, to have discussions about replacement retainers, freeing up that $192 per office visit. And every retainer that is ordered under the traditional model without a membership fee, so they pay as they go whenever they want a replacement retainer, but they're paying full price for replacement retainers based on the doctor's wishes and based on the fee set by the doctors. And our company then revenue shares with them for every retainer that's ordered.
Yeah, I like it. And I think that flexibility is going to be important in presenting the model and getting acceptance of it. And so for you, Ryan, I just want to more focus maybe just on the subscription idea. I think that may be a bad word, but if you say subscription to an orthodontist, they kind of roll their eyes. We've had that in orthodontics for a while, and people think of it as software licensing seats or certain aligner parts of programs or IT support or things like that. But as I value practices and see people that have gone kind of in the deep end with Retainers for Life, I just see this real significant revenue bump. But, we've kind of said that, the data's, too early to be really showing up in the gauge data. But do you just have some general comments on the subscription model for retainers for life, and how that might look for a practitioner, income wise, after they've been doing it for a year or two?
Yeah, and one thing, I didn't mention earlier, but I'll mention it. There's not only a practice benefit, but there's also a patient benefit for this, because if you are a patient paying as you go, in the traditional model, let's just say it's $250, that could cost you, if it's 10 retainers, that's $2,500 over time. At that wholesale price through the membership, it's about $43, I think, something like that. And so the patient would pay anywhere from 50 to 70% less than what they would pay through the traditional model. So not only is this a value for the practice, but it's also a value for the patient. If we look at, so the way we built this model on the subscription for looking at the retainers as an add-on service, we looked at gauge data. Basically, we looked at an average practice and how many D-bonds do you have per year. So we know that that's potentially, we gave an algorithm based on, what percentage would be as far as what would your retainer conversion rate be? It was about 2/3. We looked at the different retainer membership programs, starting at $900 or $1,000 down to $450, and then we did a blended membership fee basing on some of them only have one arch. So we came up, pretty detailed model here. Then we factored in, how much does the doctor get? What does the team get when it comes to a bonus? So we cascaded that all through. So from a revenue perspective, if you're on the high end, you can have an additional $500,000. And this is an average gauge practice with the D-bonds per year. And a little bit more than $500,000 cascading down to, the very low end of the membership could be 23,000, which you're not getting any really doctor bonus. It's all the money's basically going to Retainers for Life. It's all a team bonus. And that's, ranging 527, 465, 400, 290 as we cascade down the different membership tiers. Comparing that to, what a practice could get from a revenue perspective is $650,000 in lab or in-house. So that's where I said earlier, where the two models, you're going to have less revenue with the membership program, but more revenue with the lab. And then as you start to strip out the cost, there's not a lot of cost associated with onboarding and the cost to pitch it within a practice through the membership program, versus there's a lot of tangible costs with retainer appointments, shipping, lab costs, time and materials, in-house processing the retainer. So on average, when you look at the overall program value, it can range from profitability wise of, on the high end, about $500,000. And we said, on the top end, it's a little bit about $525,000 revenue. You're making a ton of profit. The margin's super high, from 521 ranging all the way down to, $250,000 there at the low end. So without the doctor bonus, once you get outside of the doctor bonus, it's only about 16,000. It's not that big of a deal. But you compare that to a lab or an in-house, and you're somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000. So you think about $500,000 cascading down to 250 to 100 to 150. You've got a big range there of difference in profitability versus a membership program versus doing it with a lab or doing it in-house. So it's substantial.
That's what we're seeing anecdotally as well. So, it just seems to me like it's an idea whose time has come. And I like your analysis about the consumer. 10 retainers over a certain amount of time is $2,500, and it's pennies if you're in the membership plan compared to that. And, it's my belief in almost all digital assets that we have right now, as far as modalities, that especially in things like monitoring, that the consumer is really ready for this. Amy, I would just ask you, in your experience, what you've done it in your practice for a while, what are the patients' feedback? And again, for the listeners, there's some great stuff and videos of patients actually citing their experience with this. But is the consumer ready for, I thought I was supposed to go to my orthodontist, I just go to this website or this app and I get my retainer, and, they've got my file from my orthodontist, and it's just that easy. Are they ready for this, and how do they respond to it?
So the consumer is ready for this. The consumer is telling us, and has been telling us in a couple of different ways, that they are looking for affordability, convenience, and efficiency. And I think the biggest thing that I have seen inside my practice, or experienced inside my practice, is Retainers for Life has eliminated the retainer friction between the doctor and the patient. And that's really huge, right? I spend 2-3 years creating a raving fan, and the patients generally are very, very happy when they get to the end of treatment, when we get to that Dean Bond appointment. But after they lose their first retainer, things change. And I have seen by bringing on this platform that it's just eliminated retainer friction. The only friction I have now are the patients that didn't opt into the membership or didn't pay for the membership. And then they come in and have to pay full price for the retainers. But it's a good time for me to say, well, we do offer this membership plan. We wish you guys had opted into it at the end of D-band. And to be quite honest with you, that usually happens after the first month that they've had their retainers, right? The 16-year-old boy that loses his retainer and doesn't know where it went after.
Oh, don't pick
And
on
so-
us guys. Come on.
Yes, I shouldn't
So
be
true.
gender specific. It's just, it's patience, patient mentality. Heck, I can barely keep up with my own iPhone and AirPods, right? And so keeping up with a retainer is no different. Not to mention that they get dingy and dirty, and it's just nice to have a clean, fresh retainer. And so I have seen in my practice, and really that's how the company began, is I started offering it inside the practice, and the adoption was, and the feedback was so good from the patients that I realized this is too good not to share with my colleagues. And so from there, really tried to create a company that was commercialized that could allow all patients to benefit from this.
Yeah, I think, again, doctors, if you're listening, it's not the patients that are going to be a problem with this program. It's you. You adopt it. The patients will go with it. They're ready for this. It saves them time, and that's the biggest gift you can give a busy parent, for sure, or adult patient for that matter. Ryan, I want to ask you. I mean, I'm thinking about, okay, what's the best way that Gage could track this? My practice management system could track this. We're kind of early into trying to figure out what the really solid picture is economically on a retention program like this. Is it just set up a procedure that says retainers for life, or is it set up a line item on my P&L that has retainers for life, or both? Or what are your best pieces of advice for how you'd love to see data come from a practice so you could track it more accurately and closer?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see. I mean, we know now we have patients in retention, but then it would be how many are in the program. So it'd be almost like setting up a code for that. And then having that line item split out, because any add-on fees just goes into production within the Gage system. So to be able to see that like a line item on the P&L, then you could actually tie that back to, what you're getting, because even within the different levels of the membership program, how many are you getting at this level versus this level versus this level. So I have a lot of ideas just on the analytics that would be really fun to track and see. But to the point where we just even did this basic model, if we can, for an average practice, if you can, do something between 250 and 500,000 of profitability or even close to top line as well, because there's not a lot of cost associated with the program. I think that's a big game changer regardless of your practice size. And it can make a big impact to your practice. So yeah, I would love to see, like right now, all we track is retention visits. So we don't know the delineation of those visits. And we know that as a % of total appointments, but we do know through the other regression analysis and work that we've done that an appointment is a cost to a practice. And we know that a $250 retainer with $192 but average appointment cost, there's not a lot of margin in that. So if there's a way to eliminate that, that's where you're able to buy those efficiencies within a practice to be able to, really drive that profitability and efficiency in a practice.
Super cool. I think we'll give you, doctor, some more advice on, how to code this so we can track it more effectively and really get you some more solid data other than the anecdotal data that we see and the feelings that we have. But all good stuff. So we're kind of coming to an end to wrap this up. I just have a couple more questions, and one of them's for both of you. I mean, kind of two gurus here of, what's happening in orthodontics, what are the trends? This certainly is one. But just to kind of jump out of the retention lane for a titch, What do the two of you see that's coming that doctors you would say you need to keep your eye on this trend or that trend? Is it just all about digital? Is it something else? How do we drive growth in our practices? Anything just kind of off the cuff that you want to give your colleagues that's something that they should be looking at?
You want to start, Amy?
Sure. I will take that one. So I think two things: anything that drives a large magnitude of efficiency and also helps you differentiate your practice are going to be things that you want to keep your eye on, right? We we've had a habit in the past of outsourcing things that have cost our practices a lot of money. So I would say that's the other thing to look for, is that there are a lot of things coming to market or already on the market that allow you to unburden yourself or to offload the work without increasing your overhead, and actually driving more profit to the bottom line. And a couple of examples I can think of are, custom brackets that might take your treatment from 24 months to 14 months. I mean, what can that do to your practice wide, if you're starting on average 300 patients a year? I also love this idea of at-home scanning. I don't know if we are as accurate with it as we need to be to utilize it in a really powerful way within our practices, but it's coming. So the ability for patients to scan and create a model that you can do something with at home is pretty exciting to me.
No, I would agree. I mean, and we're seeing some uses of that kind of idea with a number of companies right now. Ryan, you're out there a lot. I just want to give you a chance to chime in on some cool stuff that you might say, hey,
Yeah, so if I look at it just macro-wise, overall, like I agree with what Amy said, but you think about just targeting the consumer. So if we start, just overall, call it market TAM, total available market, you got 330 million Americans, of which, whatever number you want to believe, there's 100 million walking around that need some type of orthodontic treatment, of which there's only 4 to 5 that are actually in treatment at any one time. So you think about that period of 95 million between, needing it versus not in it. And even if you don't believe the 100 million, maybe it's 50, but if you could move the 4 to 5 by a million, we're seeing 20% growth in the industry, right? So it's a big number and a small amount of effort that needs to move that. But then you counteract that with the lower birth rates, right? So we know less children. The orthodontic model has always been kind of a 70-30 child to adult. However, when we look at the population, it's actually 80-20 adult child. In the past, like this is some cool data, like leading up to COVID, we always saw about 6% adult exam growth. And then when COVID hit, we saw this thing surge to be like 24%. A lot of adults came in, the Zoom effect, but then all of a sudden just fell off the cliff, right? So I guess people stopped looking at themselves on Zoom and stopped coming into the orthodontic office. So for the last 2 years, we've seen adult exam growth be negative, almost double-digit negative. And then as we finished up last year, we started to eke out growth in adults again on exams, which is was really positive. So if we are really trying to segment our market and looking at our marketing of what we're trying to do with the 80-20 population, declining birth rates, we're going to have a strategy around how do we get adults into the practice and what can we do there from a marketing perspective to get them into the practice. Obviously, when you get them into the practice, the more efficient you can be in treating them in time, or whether it's aligners or digital, that's obviously a big deal for an adult because they don't want to walk around maybe with metal in their mouth. Rather have aligners, but then it comes down to that efficiency. So as Amy mentioned, the more digital your practice, the more efficient your practice is. We know that can unlock capacity for you to grow, or it can actually help you work fewer days. Depending on if you want lifestyle or you want to build your empire. Either way, it does both, and that also leads to more profitability. And then I think too, as you look at the world we live in, the economy, I think orthodontists may not be as aggressive with fees, and we see that play out. With inflation being 3-4%, whatever it was, higher, we're taking price of 1.2, 1.3%. Orthodontists should do a little bit more there to keep up with that. Obviously, staff costs are going up. What you're buying clinically is going up. So, profits are going to be squeezed if we're not taking advantage of the efficiencies, but also driving our fees as well. So I think kind of holistically, I try to look at it from more of a macro perspective that adults are important, and then you got to manage your expenses and your costs within your practice and your efficiency in order to get that profitability where you need it to be and to see it grow year over year along with your practice.
I feel like I just listened to a summary of the last 5 years of my lectures. I mean, that was fantastic.
I've been in all of them.
Yeah,
Right.
I
That's why I
really
learned from
agree.
you.
I really agree with that. And, one of the reasons I like Retainers for Life is the name of the company. And because I think one of the shifts that I would add to this discussion is you need to see your patients, if they stay in town, as patients for life. There's a lot of data out there. I think 70% of the adult market was treated as an adolescent. They don't wear their retainers all the time. They'll wear them more if they have this product. But when they do, they need to come to you and you need to stay in communication with them. There are a lot of tools for that right now digitally to do that. So I would encourage all orthodontists, don't take your patients when they go from active treatment to retention, ever out of retention. Stay in communication with them. Retainers for Life is a great way to do that.
So amen. Yes, I love that. And retention is not the end of treatment. It really is the beginning of the post-orthodontic phase of the patient's journey with you. And if you really want to look at improving the lifetime value of each patient, then you need Retainers for Life in your practice, because that is exactly what we do.
Great stuff, guys. I appreciate both of your time. Amy, I'll leave you with the last question. I've listened to this. I'm convinced enough that I want to do something. What do I do? What's the first step I should take to get Retainers for Life going in my world?
So it starts with a discovery call with a team so that they can understand what your needs are, what the unique situation is and DNA of your practice. The best place to go for that is afterorthorevenue.com. That is the doctor-facing website, or you can go to myretainersforlife.com, which is the patient-facing website. You can get in contact with us either way, but the team would love to speak to you and understand really your unique needs so that they can help tailor a solution for you and your practice.
Well, if you're listening, I hope you guys do that. I mean, I think it's something you need to take a look at for lots of good reasons. And I think the information we tried to transfer in this last little bit will be helpful to you as you kind of think through that idea. I want to thank both of you for carving out time. We're all three running a business, running a family, and doing other things. And it wasn't the easiest to get all three of us together on our schedule. So thanks for your time. Thank you for tuning in and listening to this webinar. And Retainers for Life, we thank you for allowing me to ask the questions instead of answering for once, and have two great guests. That's all we have for you. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Chris.